All right, folks, have we got an amazing episode for you today? We're going to give you the top 5 reasons why we think people fail to achieve financial freedom. And a little hint, the list might actually surprise you. What else are we going to cover, Ben?
Well, in what's making property news, I'll continue to unpack the property investor sentiment survey. And Bryce, I'm going to talk about how smart some property investors really are.
Ooh, how smart are they, mate? Well, you'll have to stick around and find out. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
So g'day everyone. Yes, I have hijacked the weekly episode, and obviously Bryce is away, and so he can't have a right of reply. But of course, the Pies have made a grand final, their 45th grand final. And so, sorry, what was that, Bryce? Go Brisbane? Well, I can understand that, but he doesn't get a right of reply. But I absolutely couldn't let this episode go past without saying good luck to the Pies. Make it legendary, boys. Good luck. Collingwood.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and welcome back to you in this very spring edition of the Property Couch, mate. How are you?
Well, mate, this is a big episode, so I'm super excited because it's another framework in which we want to just continue to help the community in building their knowledge, push their agenda forward in that knowledge building. And for me, I sort of think about, you want more money, right? Not to have more things, but to do more things and have more experiences, which has a direct correlation with happiness. So that's what I like about today's episode.
Yeah, folks, we're going to cover the top 5 reasons why most people fail to achieve financial freedom. And I reckon you might be surprised about the list because it's really speaking to the action threshold that people need to overcome to be able to actually do something, get themselves in the arena. And so Ben and I are really excited about sharing this with you. And for some, it might be confrontational. For others, it might be an aha moment. And some, for the rest of you, it might be somewhere in between. But we are definitely going to be sharing some intel with you today that we think will help you achieve financial freedom if you embrace the concepts that we're talking about. So excited to get into it. But before we get there, Ben, I have been exposed to this. This is my Mindset Minute theme today. I've been exposed to this quote, and I went and had a look, and it's been Warren Buffett. Sometimes I think there's the Churchillian effect, where if someone makes a quote and they don't know who it's from, they just say it was Winston Churchill. I think Warren Buffett gets a little bit of that as well. You make a quote, you don't know who it is, you say. So I'm just going to say anonymous at this stage. And when I use the word man, I want people to realize I'm talking about human, right? So I'm just quoting this particular quote. But when a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with experience leaves with the money, and the man with money leaves with the experience. And if you let that land, the reason I wanted to bring that up, Ben, is because in the context of what we're trying to talk about today, spruikers often do that because they play a game that allows them to have the experience. Because most of the time, here's my observation of a lot of spruikers that I've come across in the journey. Their strategy is pretty sound. Buy properties, hold on to them, use the tax system to help you out, self-fund your retirement, don't rely on the pension. Property in this country is a good thing. They usually put you in some areas that if you could find an established property, we might be interested in. But the thing is, if they're an enthusiastic amateur, that's fine. But for a lot of them, they know it's not in the best interest of their clients. So let's read that again. When a man with money, i.e. the person who has just had a telemarketed call to them and they've got some equity in their house, meets a man with experience, i.e. the spruiker, who knows how the game works and knows how to extract the money out of them. The man with the experience, i.e. the spruiker, leaves with the money, i.e. theirs, and the man with the money, i.e. the person with the equity in their home, leaves with an experience, and quite often that experience isn't known for some time down the track. So I'm unashamedly trying to help our community understand that if you've only just been listening to us for a little while, it might not be as obvious, but we vehemently believe in established properties, older properties over new properties. So when I saw that quote, Ben, it sort of really resonated for me, and hopefully someone who's listening to that goes, your job is to try and not be the person that goes 5 years, looks back and goes, yeah, I saw the experience, took my money, and now I've got the experience, and then you lose those 5 years. The idea is to try and hopefully listen to some of the things that we're going to talk about today, apply them to some of the things we've talked about over the journey, so that you actually don't fall prey to some of the spruiker activities.
Well, it's also mathematically impossible for the new to outperform the old if all things being equal, right? There will be obviously some outliers that are attached to that. But in simple terms, if you've got a $600,000 home and 400,000 of that is in the build or improvements on the land, and only 200,000 is in the land, versus a $400,000 land value and only 200,000 on the improvements, and it's land that appreciates, mathematically, if all things being equal and you get the same growth level, you're going to earn more and make more money out of the old property versus the new property. So to that point, let me just pass on that experience to you, and I'm not going to take your money.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Property Couch is free, so hopefully we can provide that community service. And stay tuned if you're a subscriber to our podcast, but not our YouTube channel. Go and check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because you and I have been cooking up a video around the very concept that you just talked about. I'm just finalising the framework on that, and then we'll release that shortly, explaining in detail the very concept that you talked about and why it's impossible. It's just mathematically impossible, to your point, for new to beat old or established. So there you go. All right, we have what we think is a very exciting opportunity to share with our community today. So let's rip into it now. All right, Ben, I'm really excited about the conversation that you and I are going to have today, because we're going to talk about the top 5 reasons that people fail to achieve financial freedom. And I think people might be surprised by the list that we go through. Because I don't think it's going to be the typical list that you would expect, and it's largely around an observation that you and I have made over 20 plus years, and we talked about this at certain levels throughout our, maybe the last 6 months. But there is one thing that we've observed very specifically, which is the difference between successful people and people who aren't successful, and that's simply around taking action. So today, we're going to talk about the top 5 reasons that people fail to achieve financial freedom, and it's going to be around that theme, mate.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Bryce, when you mention that it's not going to be your typical sort of stuff, right? It's because a lot of the elements associated with are behavioural or emotional. And so what we've obviously been able to learn through not only our own education and our own household experiences, but when you actually sit down with hundreds and if not thousands of people and have this type of dialogue, you get to some of those layers which are really, really challenging for some people. So I'm excited about where we're taking today's conversation, because it really will challenge you in regards to your own situation. And I think, there's a period around sort of how people look at this in terms of this is a non-judgment. So we want, we want you to have a breakthrough by listening to this episode, but we also want you to feel like, hey, what's happened in the past shouldn't be an anchor or a mooring line in terms of how you can think about the future. So we're not judging what you haven't done in the past and the procrastination that might have got you, but what we are talking about is how you move forward and some of the critical things you need to do. And again, that's not necessarily in the sort of observational stuff. It's also, it's inside, it's in that sort of, behavioural and also that emotional piece. So, mate, I reckon we just hook straight into it.
Yeah, no. So I think breakthrough is the right word and the right terminology that you use there, because I think people will have a breakthrough. So let's have a look and see if you recognise any of these things. But there's an analogy that we want you to have, and It's an onion. And what we're about to do is we're about to peel back layers of the onion so that we can actually get to the real core. So I originally saw this concept with an American entrepreneur by the name of Alex Hormozy. He got it from Dr. Albert Ellis, right? And it was described, it's their words, not mine, as the victim handbook. So why people don't take action, right? So if we are able to reveal what those circumstances are, hopefully we can help people who are listening to this, because if in our observation the number one success is not location does 80% of the heavy lifting, even though that's important. It's not the buyer's decision quadrant, even though that's important. It's not understanding your numbers, and even though that's important. If you understand that the number one hierarchy of the reasons why people don't have any success is because of their ability to or their ability to not take action.
They're putting excuses in front of their action taking, Bryce. Is that sort of?
Yeah, and we all do it because we're all incentivized. We're all incentivized. Here's the deal. In my observation, we want to increase our status, but also defend any opportunity to decrease our status. So we won't talk too much about increasing status because a lot of that is self-evident. But a decreasing status maneuver would be and you're going to talk about this a bit later on around people's money management, but if I make a move and it doesn't work, I will decrease my status with my significant other, my friends, the people in the street who know me, all those sorts of things. So therefore, one of the best defenses that we have to not decrease our status, Ben, it's called status quo. It's called do not do anything. It's called, then when I look in the rear vision mirror, I can actually go, hey, listen, it wasn't my fault. It was X, it was Y, it was Z. However, if you actually do take action and for whatever reason it doesn't come off, well, then there's a clear correlation between you as the decision maker or not. So we've talked about FOMO before, the fear of messing up. It is very much a part of our psyche, and some of the reasons why, if you have a look at the numbers, Ben, it's just over 2 million property investors in a population base of 25 million. That percentage isn't great. And of that percentage, small percentage do multiple. So if you have 2 properties, you are an outlier anyway. 2 investment properties I'm talking about, you are an outlier. So therefore, it is self-evident that people struggle with this stuff. So let's kick into it. The first reason that people fail, Ben, is actually the first 3 are going to be circumstances, right? So the first one is time. Time. So if you think about the outermost layer of the onion, that is the easiest one to sort of have as a defense to why we can't take action, because I've run out of time. And we can actually break this up in 3 ways, Ben. First of all, we can break it up as a macro. All right. So think about it as this is a busy season for me. I could be promoted. I could be moving interstate. I could have just had a baby. I could have had any season that suggests right now is too busy for me to actually do something, Ben. And I think that a lot of people could relate to that. But I guess the first thing that you and I want to say is if you can relate to that, busy is the best time to start, because it's based on the premise that you foresee that in some point in the future you were never going to be busy. And if you think about that, it's a bit of a fallacy that we think, well, okay, I'm in this busy season, I'm not going to be busy going forward, because we are in a society that's getting busier and busier, and quite often we use it as a badge of honor. How are you going? I'm busy, right? So if you're going to be busy again, busy is the best time to actually get support and actually take action, because if you can do it when you're in busy season, when you get to that time when it's not so busy, well, you know what to do, because when it gets busy again, you've actually got the lane, the tracks that have already been laid for you to know what to do.
Yeah, have a look at the busy people in your life. Have a look at the people who are achieving, who are doing great things that are highly productive. Study them. You can also see it in, obviously in the public view as well. So there's those people who are just getting on with it. I mean, it's amazing. They might be running a company, but they've also got time for their charity work. They've also got time for exercise and that type of thing. And then just also have a look at people around you who are just doing things that impress you around that. And you'll just see that they are busy people, but they're not letting busy be that sort of determinant to not take action. They're just basically finding a way to be able to achieve that. So that's part of that sort of breaking through. They're not sort of saying, all right, because I'm too busy, I don't have the ability to do that. And I think that is definitely an excellent takeaway. And bringing that back to your earlier point about those people only have a couple of properties. I mean, at the end of the day, property is the vehicle that we advocate is a great way for financial freedom and to basically retire financially secure. But we don't care what vehicle it is in a lot of respects. But we also know, to your point, that those people who are retiring financially free, and they've got financial peace, you can always count those as a small minority of a group of people. Just have a look at their actions and their behaviours and what they've done over the last 20 or 30 years, and you'll find your answer that they just found a way to break through.
They took action despite the season they were in. So really, you want to get support when you need it the most, right? So if the macro is it's a busy season, great. That's the time to get support so that you can actually still take the action steps for you because you will get busy. So that's at the macro level.
Yep.
Again, with time, there's also the micro level. So that's when someone says, "Look, I don't have any time in the day," and you can never really pull someone's phone off them when they say that, Ben, and go through the little screen time analyzer and actually see how much time they're spending on the certain apps. For some people, like you and I, we spend a bit of time on AFL.com. Other people spend it on Instagram. Other people spend it on Pinterest. Whatever app of choice is, you are making a choice at that point in time to spend your time doing that over something else. But that's very difficult to bring that up for someone. But I guess the challenge is if you have a spouse or a partner or a significant other that says that to you, you might be able to gently nudge them and say, "Hey, listen, let's go through that exercise and see how much time you do spend," because everyone has the same 24 hours. We all have the same 24 hours. It's about how we allocate it, right? So if you think about, there are people that are achieving more with their time than us with the same time frame. It's what are the actions that they're actually doing to do that. So, and it's also identifying it is just a smokescreen. It is a reason for us to avoid dropping our status by making the wrong decision, by bringing something up that actually helps us blame something else. But the idea here is if you take action and you do it correctly, and if you take the right advice, you then get to cut 90% of what's not working. If you spend more than you earn, if you allocate money towards things that are not productive for what you want to do, if there's opportunities, if you have a vision for where you want to go and what you want to do, that vision might help you get super, super focused and cut the things out of your budget that you don't need, and also cut the things out of your life that are providing barriers and time wasters where you could be spending more time doing the things that matter. So that's the second way that we can tackle the time issue, Ben.
Yeah, look, again, I'll bring it into context. How much time in looking at your phone and looking at whatever it is, shorts or TikTok or whatever you're spending your time looking at, that you're impressed with these human feats or these funny moments? Or how much is it adding to your life? How much is it improving your ability to make an impact and live a purposeful life? Because we can all be impressed with it, and make no mistake, I can sit there and watch a piece of material being made into some incredible bit of art, and it's very impressive. But I can also sit back and say, well, what am I doing about working on me and doing all the things that I need to do to be able to break through and get the results that I'm looking for? And I think if you're honest with yourself, which is coming back to your point, is that I'm spending like 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week just watching these feeds of rubbish or some social interaction or some social experiment, which still might be a train wreck. But really, what is it adding to my life? Does it make me feel better that I'm not that train wreck of that relationship breakup? Seriously, the world is a big oyster out there. Get out there and enjoy it, and do other things, because that's the big part for me. I always make sure that if I'm fall into that trap, I'm like, all right, what am I going to do to get some extra learning, to get some extra development, to get some extra knowledge and information. And that's a big message that I give to anyone who wants to, again, break through and take action.
To prove that we're humans too, Ben, if you had have looked at my analysis of time on screen, let's say 6 months ago, I reckon you would have found I had like everyone, Ben, I was susceptible to apps that were not productive. I was just a flaky consumer.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a look at it now, you'll find I spend most of my time on my phone in the podcast app, in the Audible app. And I spend an above average amount of time on YouTube. YouTube is my social media of choice because I'm a student of life, and I find the people that I like to follow provide a lot of really great content for free. And if you think about, the previous generation said, I want to make, if you've ever said, I want to make the next generation's life better, and then realized that you actually can do that, right? Because the thing is, if we have a look at Warren, we go, oh, why didn't Uncle Warren, that is, make more money? It's because he never had himself. He never had himself. He only had Benjamin Graham, whereas we've got all of the information from Warren Buffett and all of the people that have learned from him, who then provide a platform that we can learn. So therefore, the next generation should do it faster, quicker, better than what you and I have done, Ben. We never had podcasts when we were first starting. So the people listening to this podcast, and hopefully some of the content we're talking about today is groundbreaking for them to understand.
Love it.
We never had that. So therefore, It should get easier and it should get more straightforward. So just be careful where you're spending your time, folks. But if you've said, I don't have time in my day, we would just say that that's potentially a smokescreen for inaction, so that you don't drop your status by having to make a decision. So there we go. Time, we've covered macro. It's a busy season. Micro is I don't have time of the day. And then the third one here under time, which is circumstantial, it's called the when-then fallacy. So it goes something like this, Ben. When I have time, then I will start. When I have abs, then I'll go to the gym. When I start losing weight, then I will eat better. It's a fallacy. It's a flipped sequence. It's actually logically not correct to actually try and see them in that order, because some of these things require you to actually flip it and go, I don't have money, therefore I should take action. I don't have time, therefore I should put these things in place. So it's called the when-then fallacy under time, Ben, and it's important that we identify it.
Look, and putting in the context of a lot of the clients that we get to work with and so forth, I mean, the ones who do take action find a way to that being busy. So they're not using, we're just going to have it, we're just going to start our family first, or we're just going to get that out of the way, or we're just going to wait till the kids finish school and then we'll have a little bit of extra money. They still find a way. The ones who make a significant difference to their personal financial position, they don't have that mindset. They don't believe that way. And so that's another little sort of reach out when you have this sort of headspace of planning to become and sequencing. They're trying to find a way through. They're not just sort of saying, it's impossible, I can't find that way through.
Yeah. It shows up in other ways when people say, oh, when the government changes, I will then do something. Or when we get more clarity around the rental freeze debate, I'll do something. Or when we've got clarity around whether we can get the travel allowance to come back that was taken away.
Or when the market crashes, Bryce. That's a classic one, right? Or when the market crashes. I mean, I was at a luncheon the other day and I sat next to someone who tell me a story about, them selling their property because they believe that the market is going to crash. Yeah. And they've been sitting out of the market for a period of time, and it hasn't quite done that. And so they're the dangers sometimes. And again, no judgment there, but I just worry about the information that people are gathering and just how dangerous some of the actions that they're taking from that misinformation to be able to be in place, because that's another excuse that they come up with.
So, folks, as you're listening to this, I wonder if you just do a little audit in your mind to see if, okay, are any of these popping up for you? Do you have the fear of messing up? And some of these things act as beautiful alibis for you to actually not take action. Because here's the deal. Time is the easy one. That's the first layer of the onion, right? So if some of you have listened to that and gone, okay, makes sense that the busy season is the best time to actually get some support and move forward. And there is a way for me to find time in my day, and because other people are achieving more with the same 24 hours. And then we realize that the when then is actually just a fallacy and it's broken. And so we go, great, time is no longer the barrier for me taking action. Well, then what happens is once we've peeled that layer of the onion back, the next layer pops up. And the next layer usually comes around value. Okay. So cost. How much does it cost to actually get advice or help? Or in our circumstances, we are very, very strong advocates of starting with a plan, right? Because it's the roadmap and laying the track for what should be something that makes it straightforward for the steps after that, right? So value. So the first way we want to tackle this, Ben, is we want to explain why paying money, if you feel like it's a lot of money to actually get some help, why that's actually good. So I want to start with a story. So I've been doing this for 25 years, and I love my family to death, Ben. I'm a very big family guy, as you are, right? So over the journey, I've got a cousin over in Perth who's asked me a bunch of questions. But outside of that one cousin, none of my family have actually asked me for advice, for help, because I always put it down to that little brother syndrome. No matter what sort of success or I guess external markers of, hey, he might know what he's talking about it's still just the little brother, or that's the cousin, or that's my nephew, or whatever, right? But sort of contrast that with people over the journey, with the thousands of people you and I've helped, where they pay to play. And so because they've put their money on the table, it means a lot to them, and usually is the reason why they'll be successful, because it did mean a lot to them. And because of the fact that they put the money on the table, which forced them to go all in on their energy and their focus, actually helps them lower the barrier for action.
Well, a real simple one, right, is when you've got a personal trainer and you're paying that personal trainer to turn up on a certain day, and you know they're going to be there, and you put some money into you find a way, right? You absolutely find a way to make that happen, and you get there, and you feel great after the effort. Like, you feel really, really good in terms of you've worked your body over, you've set yourself up. Usually it's in the morning, so you're setting yourself up for a really strong, productive day where the head's and the mind's strong and sharp. So I do find it quite interesting, right? I mean, the other way in which I look at this sometimes is, you hear a lot of people talking about the multiple mistakes that they've made. And then you ask, well, how much advice did you get before you actually embarked on all of these efforts? Well, not much, So that they've decided to touch the pot, burn their hand multiple times before. So I just like this idea that if I'm going to pay some professional person, I'm asking them qualifying questions. You've made a lot of mistakes. Yep. So I've learned from my bad mistakes. That's one way of looking at it. But I'm also interested in the people who've made the least amount of mistakes. So when you talk about Uncle Warren, he still talks about their mistakes. But here's the best part. He's made the least amount of mistakes of most people, because he's studied the subject matter so intently that he's been able to be incredible in terms of the returns he's been able to produce for his shareholders, which he has this unbelievable view that he's a shareholder more so than an employee or anything else. So everything, sort of comes from that value concept of being in play. And I just love this whole idea of this second layer of value. So I always talk about benefit over cost. What's the benefit? What's the value that I'm going to get when I think about the investment that I'm going to make here? And if it's, Bryce, if I'm getting your 25 years of research and experience in terms of what you've done, plus you've got a team of people behind you that you're sharpening your iron with all the time, man, why am I not going to listen to you? Like, with thousands of purchases behind, the group of knowledge that's behind us, it's like, sounds like.
Well, let me return to you on that point, because someone was going to have to live 1,000 lifetimes to actually get the same level of experience that you and I get by delivering a plan. So when you've delivered several thousand plans, several thousand different scenarios that you get to see, that plays out, and that becomes an experience that someone who doesn't get to see that will never be able to compete with to that point, Ben. So it's an important point you make. I remember prior to COVID, I'd go over to the States every year. You and I went a couple of times together. And it's amazing. You get in the room full of incredibly motivated people. I remember one guy who was Mexican, who I built up a friendship, having seen this person time and time again when I go over. And he told a story about how he was in dire straits financially, was in credit card debt to the point where the income that he was earning was not able to ever get out of that debt spiral. And so what he did is he invested in his own skills. Now, I'm not, just for clarity, I'm not suggesting this is the thing to do, because what he did is to invest in his skills. He actually used the credit card again to buy the course that required him to get the skill set. But what actually happened is it equipped him with the skills. That was an investment in himself that meant that his income actually could grow. Now that credit card debt became a thing of the past. No longer had credit card debt, and is making incredible transformations in the life of a lot of people, right? So the point is, in theory, you could state a case that if someone's in an enormous amount of financial distress, inviting them to go into further distress to actually get ahead potentially is not the right thing to do. And yet this person, in the context of what we're talking about, said, if I pay that money, it will mean a lot to me. I see it as a way that I can move forward and have a better pathway in the future, and therefore, and now the rest is a wonderful part of his history. And
just a quick little final word on that, Bryce, is like people who are about to go into bankruptcy or have, bad credit and all of those things, they engage professionals to potentially negotiate them out of that, to try and avoid that. Right now, that's a cost. Some people also engage money managers to help them, control their spending and build new habits. So in some cases, you might be right, they're last resorts. But the point we're trying to make is that there is value to be had in terms of gaining experience and knowledge from these subject matter experts that will get you through and get you out the other side. And so if you're time poor, but you also see value in this, you got to, that's the leverage. You use leverage to be able to, have that access to that professional, in addition to obviously making that investment into your situation.
So in terms of value, that is why a lot of money to you is good, because it provides the fuel and the fire that actually gets you to get off your backside and actually get something done. So that's good. Now the second layer of value is why it's actually not a lot of money, right? So because if all it did was help you, this is to your I guess origin story benefit. All it did was help you trap surplus and show you how many properties you need to buy and what the North Star is. Well, would it be worth it? And then if the answer is yes, but the money is still something that you need to overcome, well, then it just becomes a belief issue, and because you don't believe the result rather than the fact that the plan in this circumstance can actually help you. So if all it did was help you identify some of these key questions to help you move forward, then chances are it's definitely worth it, and why sort of spending money on your future is not a lot. Now, the third point here is what's money good for anyway, right? So if you were, so we're trying to build a context around paying for advice versus not paying for advice here too, right? So chances are you're going to spend that money in the next 12 months anyway. But if you think about the 4 ways that you pay, procrastination, the wrong strategy, paying too much, or professional advice, you're going to pay for it anyway, right? So it's just whether you get to choose what that looks like. And 3 out of 4 of those usually don't get you the outcome that you're after. So in this case, to answer the question of what money is good for, you're going to pay for what you value the least. So if you value your time the least, then you'll save the time and not spend your money, right? But if you value your money the least, you'll pay for it in time. So for example, there's a lot of people who just go, I do not want to lose a decade time is what's most important to me, therefore I will pay to get it done. Perfect. Whereas people say, I'm going to hoard this money. I don't want to do so that they will have to pay through the procrastination tax of not knowing how to get it done in a fast enough time period, because that's one currency that you can never replace, which is time. And we see a lot of clients who have some regrets around that, Ben.
We talk about it all the time. Is my money working hard enough for me? Because if I'm not investing it into knowledge and understanding, and I'm not investing it into appreciating assets, then I'm not necessarily getting that result. Which all comes back to what the purpose of this episode is all about, is why most people are failing. It's because we're trying to break these layers down. And so this whole value layer and time layer is an important part to, again, peel back those onion layers to get to that core. And this is one of the bigger ones where, loss aversion, risk return, all of those things are real barriers here. But if you ask yourself a question, well, can I save my way to a comfortable retirement? No, you can't. So you're going to have to deploy that money in some way. And to Bryce's point about the 4 ways you pay, the smart money would suggest have a look at proven performance, have a look at the cash on cash return, have a look at the volatility story around property. Combine all of those things together and you start to tell yourself a different story around, actually, I feel like this is becoming lower and lower risk because I'm becoming more and more informed.
Yeah, and if you're really honest with yourself, you might have already paid in the last 5 to 10 years from that procrastination cost anyway, because chances are it's probably not the first rodeo in your mind to be thinking about how you can solve this problem. And if you think about all of that opportunity cost, if you think about every barbecue conversation, you think about every fish that got away, all of those stories, as frustrating as they are, and as much as you can contribute at the barbecue around, you've got a lived experience of the one that got away. Generally speaking, you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person who's actually got the story. The cheapest property that I've still got, Ben, I paid $191,000 for, and it was a lot. It was a lot when I bought it. So, and now it doesn't sound like a lot, but you don't want to have that story in the rear vision mirror without your name on the title. So, and then the last one here for unpacking how much it costs and the value and all those sorts of things is really around why often you don't actually need money. So we have stories within our client base. We have stories within our summer and winter series. We have stories of anecdotes of people where they've actually not needed money to get started. So you think by definition, every self-made millionaire started with nothing, because if they were self-made, it means that they didn't get any help from anyone. So therefore, you just need to be resourceful, not necessarily have resources, and that's a big one. And I think that plays to the story of the guy that I met who was from Mexico. He was resourceful rather than having resources. And if you think about the story on this one that I love is Shoe Dog with Phil Knight. You might remember Onitsuka, Ben, how that was the Japanese supplier of the Tiger shoes that Phil Knight had before he turned them into Nike. And there was a point where he couldn't afford to pay payroll for his staff. And so he went to the supplier and said, hey, listen, can you pay payroll? And they're like, what? And he said, well, in order for me to be able to buy the next shipment of shoes, I need you to be able to pay the payroll for me. So on paper, couldn't pay payroll, but found a way to get it done. And then clearly that company is now by far and away the number one company, and worth several $1 billion to Phil Knight personally, as well as multi-billion dollars as a market cap for that. So it all started with the decisions that people make at pivot points in their life when they decide they need to have resourcefulness, not resources.
I always, I'm a practical person, Bryce, you know how practical I am, but you can't, I've never seen anyone create wealth without spending money. Yep. So you're ultimately doing something there, right? Whereas buying shares, starting a bit, you're spending to receive it. The Phil Knight story, I can't sell the shoes if I don't have the product. So can you help me with payroll? Like, you spend it to make it, and property is that beautiful passive vehicle to do that. It's a passive investment. It's a small business. You're running it on the side, and it's another one of the great reasons why it's such a cool investment because it doesn't take a lot of your time up, so you don't have that another excuse that time excuse.
So Ben and I are talking about the top 5 reasons we fail to take action and therefore we don't achieve the financial freedom that we're after. The first one we talked about is time. It's the initial smoke screen we put out there. It's circumstances to give us a reason that we don't have to make a decision, that we can keep status quo. We don't have to do anything. If we can actually break through that particular circumstance, we then come up to value, money for, value for money. So we've just covered that. Now let's assume that people have broken through that layer of the onion, Ben. We're getting closer to the core. So the next layer that we're going to come up against as a reason why people fail to take action is the fit. Better said, I'm not sure if it's for me, which again is the third smoke screen. Circumstantially, it's usually a bit closer to our hearts, so we guard it. But if we've gone through those first two, so the way that we approach this, Ben, in terms of not sure if it's for me, is first of all to go, okay, you are going to have to take on a new identity and have new priorities. So the most obvious example for everyone around adopting a new identity is one weekend, Ben, you decide that you want to go riding a push bike on a highway with a bunch of dudes or a bunch of ladies together. And if you were to wear boardies and a peak cap, you would look out of place. So you have to adopt a new identity. And for those in the know, it's a mammal. So it's a middle-aged man in lycra. So we have to don the lycra. Now, I say we as if I'm doing it, and I'm not. But clearly those who love cycling, who love road cycling, adopt an identity. They put the lycra pants on, Ben. They put the tight shirts on where they can put their little gel packs in. They've got their beautiful crafted helmets that will protect them. They've got the cleats that they clip in. All of that stuff, it's an identity that they take on. Now, for me personally, I take on an identity of a mountain bike rider. So I've got slightly baggier pants, Ben. I've got slightly different helmet, but it's the same thing. We take on the identity of what it is that we do. So if someone actually wants to get a passive income for the purposes of our discussion by buying established residential property, 2 or 3 in number with their home and their super, they're going to have to take on an identity because your old priorities got you where you were. So if you actually want to move forward, you actually do have to change it. So if you're saying, I'm not sure it's for me, that's okay. It's normal that you have to put on a different cape. You have to put on a different identity so that you can identify with people that are going in that direction.
And for a lot of the people in our community who are listening to this, or first timers who are listening to this, I'm going to give you some confidence to say, in a lot of respects, a lot of you have already done this. And let me give you this example. A lot of people are fearful of share investing and, buying into businesses because they don't understand it. And, it's quite volatile. And so they see that as risky. The fact that you're thinking that residential property seems and feels a bit safer is you taking on that identity. So there's a tick in the box for you already. Now, subconsciously, you've made that choice. So to Bryce's point, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to take on that identity, I need to get more serious about this. I need to transform into, all right, well, what does this stuff look like? How informed do I get? And to the other analogy with the bike story is like, yeah, if I'm on my BMX and I'm trying to, cover 60 kilometers versus I'm on a race bike and I'm, aerodynamic and I can move quicker, there's a lot quicker way in which I can be more productive in terms of taking on that identity than trying to battle on into a headwind on a BMX bike. So there are obviously identities, and then there are tools of your craft that you will need to understand and get informed about, or you bring in a coach or an expert who's going to be able to help you to do that. So you can see how these little bits of building blocks start building on themselves for you to be able to then say, hey, at the end of the day, I'm a property investor. Or I'm a budding property investor about to execute on my very first purchase.
And what is an identity of someone who does that, Ben? Well, first of all, they spend less than they earn.
Yeah.
They if they're not used to looking at the numbers, they start looking at the numbers. They actually start thinking future orientation. They start to get gazelle-like on what they don't want to spend their money on so that they can free up surplus to invest a bit for tomorrow and invest a bit for today on the things that they love doing. This is the identity that property investors take on. They start to do the things that not many people do, and it may be uncomfortable, but they've got to be new priorities, because here's the statement that will jolt you. The old priorities got you where you currently are. So if you don't take on that new identity, then you're going to be challenged. Then you will probably have that smoke screen serve you by saying, not sure if this is for me. The second way we tackle this, Ben, is the pain of change. So you've got to change. So to your point, if you are used to riding a BMX bike, and you start trying to do 100 kilometers on a BMX bike in a peloton of crew, you will get blown out of the water very, very quickly by this peloton, right? And they probably won't accept, because there was be some rejection that comes from just always being at the back, not doing your part in the aerodynamics. So I'm sure all the cyclists are going to ride and say, you don't even know what you're talking about, right? But clearly there's pain to change. So you've got to change to change. But there's a threshold point here. And this applies to anywhere in our life, Ben, but we're just bringing it down to money here. If the pain of change is greater than the pain of staying the same, you won't do anything, right? But if the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, that's the tipping point, right? So I guess for a lot of people, that FOMO, the fear of messing up, the fear of losing status, the fear of the addiction to status quo, which means I can blame someone else. If that pain of change isn't strong enough, if the pain of change is not greater, if the pain of staying the same is not greater than the pain of change, if you won't do anything. So at this point, we need to amplify. We need to stack the pain. We need to actually think 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, and try and put yourself into that position that if nothing changes, except that the amount of candles that I blow out on the cake each year has gotten larger, but my circumstances are similar. How does that actually feel for you? Because if that pain starts to build and starts to get you to a point where you do move into that pivot point, well, then that's super important for us. So the pain of change, you've got to change to change, because if you don't, you're just going to keep doing what you've always done.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful about the plan to become what you plan to become, and aligning your financial goals with your personal goals, right? So it is about the lifestyle that you want to live, the impact that you want to make. If you're not progressing towards that, then ultimately there is going to be this self-reflection where staying the same is going to eventually, frustrate the crap out of you, to put it in simple terms. And so we're hoping by illustrating that, that there is a terrific outcome to be had over 5, 10, 15, 20 years of doing this, and supplementing your exertion income for a passive income is incredibly powerful for those people who can claim self-funded retirement. But again, it's a small minority, so that's why we're talking to our community, because this community understands, they're aspiring, and we're just trying to get them to move along into action. So I think that one's a powerful message, Bryce. That's why I love that one so much. That the pain of change does need to be greater than staying the same, because if you really think about that, that's going to cause you to take action.
So as you're doing an audit, folks, the last one around, I'm not sure if it's for me or the fit, is kind of it's a hypothetical, and so if you're faced with the challenge of, okay, I want to do a plan to move forward, I want to have a roadmap, but you're not sure if it's for you. Here's the question: ask yourself, all right, what's missing? Okay, and if you identify what's missing, then if that was in it, would it make a difference? Because what you find here is, again, we're talking about smoke screens for people taking action. Once you ask someone, what is actually missing here that you'd like it to have, quite often the answer is, I don't know, right? I don't know. And if that's the case, then it just becomes it's likely just a limiting belief with them, right? And it's got nothing to do with the pathway forward or the plan. Because if we remember what our baseline thesis is, that people do not want to decrease their status, and by making the wrong decision will contribute to them decreasing their status. But if they really confront that limiting belief, and we can circle back to what that is, and you'll see as we move further into the fifth one, we're at the third one now, we can really quickly get to the core. So, but again, if we sort of recap, Ben, we're going through the top 5 reasons why we think people fail to achieve financial freedom. That first one was all around time, first layer. We get to the second layer, which is the value or the cost of money, or how much we need to spend to get that advice. Okay, so we can break through that. We then get to the third layer, which is about the fit. If not sure if it's for me. So what we've really covered in those 3 is under the branch of circumstances. There's circumstances in our life that we can blame for us to stay doing what we want to do. Now, as we move on to the fourth one, we can move from blaming circumstances, and we can start talking about other people. All right. So others in our life. It's authority. We defer our power to someone else, and quite often the deferral of this power is actually only in our minds. It's actually not in reality. So the way that we cover that is in a couple of ways. First of all, we've got to really isolate the foil and hopefully collapse it, which means identify who is that person that you need to get that power from. So for a lot of people, it's their significant life partner, but it could be authority from a father figure, a mother figure, a mentor in their life, someone who has mooring lines over them that are invisible and not perhaps seen to that person, but there's something that we hold inside ourselves. So the first question is, for that is, does your partner know that you're here? Yes or no? Usually yes. So then you ask the question, well, what do you think they wouldn't approve of here? Again, it might be something, well, they don't want me to fail. Oh, okay. They don't want you to fail. All right, well, let's talk about you then, because it's got nothing to do with them and everything to do with you. You can see how we're starting to move closer to the core here, Ben, which is really, really important. But we need to isolate and collapse it to avoid it as being the smokescreen, so that we can actually talk specifically to what's going on.
Yeah, I think one of the really important points, so if I put my sort of professional advisory hat on, one of the interesting and most important questions that I would ask a couple, if they are coming in for an initial consult, is, are you both here of free will? Because I'm trying to get a sense of, are you on the same page? Because
who's been dragged along?
Yeah, who's here with who's the one that's sort of driving the show, and who's the tag along? Because I think it's really important that the beautiful part about us humans is we're so unique and different, and we have different beliefs and different attitudes and all of these things that make up basically the tapestry of life, and that's the beautiful thing about being alive. But when we are talking about moving in the same direction, plan to become what we plan to become, we've got to have that uniformity, because if we don't have that, then the likelihood of success, the probability of success does get impacted by that. But once you do know that both of you are on the same page, and you ask yourself this other really important question is, do you want to do more things and have more experiences and have a more meaningful life? I think everyone would answer yes to that. And so if that is the gravitational pull that's asking you to challenge yourself around taking action and to do this work on yourself around breaking through from a behavioural and a mindset point of view, you're putting yourself in the best position for success.
Yeah, agreed. So I guess if you've then isolated and collapsed that, the next thing you probably realise that you've within because we want couples to be making decisions together, but if it's one person who's deferring to the other, the permission is probably already been given, and you never need it in the first place. So what does that look like? So you ask a question, does the person that you're deferring to approve of the current struggle? Do they know that you're in a bit of pain? Do they understand that you might be following a path of your family tree that is in a direction that neither of you want to go? Well, that probably chances are they don't approve of the current struggle, right? And so then that comes to, okay, well, let's reverse the roles here. So you're the person who is being deferred to, and your significant other is the person that's being asked the same question. What would happen? And you'd be like, generally, yeah, I'd be supporting and providing that. So therefore, it becomes a support discussion, not a permission discussion. And that's really important for us to uncover that. It needs to be a support discussion, not a permission. And generally speaking, in a lot of cases, not all, because we do know in some circumstances that there is someone who's large and in charge and needs to be consulted, and that's not what we're proposing here. But if in an equal scenario, generally speaking, it is that support, not permission. But here's what happens if you project it into the future. If you don't actually unpack this one, and you defer it to someone else, and it's a monster under the bed that's in your head that's not actually in reality. Here's the challenge: resentment starts to kick in, because if they don't approve of the current struggle, and if the role was reversed, they'd be okay. Therefore, it's a support, not permission game, and you don't actually have that conversation, that real conversation, that will build into resentment. That will definitely build into resentment, particularly if you think that they will say no.
Look, and we all know that in terms of relationships with significant others, 1 in 3 fail. What Bryce has just tapped on is the big part of why those relationships ultimately don't survive. Because if we're not moving in the same direction, if we're not supporting each other and having that sort of permissions and responsibility and purpose in terms of what we're doing, then we will drift apart. And so, again, some of the best work you can do in terms of on your relationship is being transparent and open and honest about how you're feeling about your current position and what you're trying to do. And I know that this falls really deeply into decisions about spending money for today and into the future as well. It's about that, but we need these things now, or we need to be, versus, but the future is also important, that we allocate a bit of money to that, because if we don't do that, and so getting that balance right, I get it, it's hard, but if you do it well and you do it well planned and you sequence correctly, you will be able to enjoy both the here and now as well as that future. And that resentment, that ability to not live your best life, because that's what we're talking about here, is allowing both of us to live our best lives if we're in a relationship, to be able to move forward. And unfortunately, finances do play a significant role in that conversation.
Yeah, well said, Ben. So for us, the way that we've structured that in our business to help with this is we've done what we call a risk reversal. You see it a lot, but it's we have a money back option, right? So what it means is if someone engages us, they pay $500 to kick it off, because you can only actually make the decision on the inside, right? It's not like you can actually tell on the outside. It's an insider's game. So what we do is we say, let's have that first conversation, bring together the two significant people, if it's 2 or more, the significant people in the conversation, bring them together, bring bucket lists, let us talk to you about what the value looks like. And then at the end of that, you guys get to decide together from a position of being from the inside, not from being on the outside. Because if you don't want to proceed or you don't see the value, then whatever money you've contributed up until that point, no questions asked, to give the money back. So that actually helps with the deferral to someone else, because it's real. Like it's a lot of money. You don't want to. We're not advocating that you make decisions outside of significant life partners. What we're asking you to do to drop the action threshold and actually take some action is to bring them along as well. And so that's one of the ways that we do that. So, all right. So if we go back to our onion, Ben, we've peeled back the time layer, we've peeled back the value layer, we've peeled back the fit layer, we've peeled back the others or the deferring authority. So what actually happens is if we can get people to picture this analogy, they've got the onion. Having done that, they are now looking at the core of the onion. We are talking about the real process, the real decision maker here. We are now starting to get super focused and vigilant on you as the decision maker, empowering you as the decision maker to actually do something, because it's you that actually wants whatever that dream outcome is. For us, it's $2,000 a week. But for whatever your dream outcome is, we're getting to the core. We've actually got to the person who is in decision right. So how do we look at this? There's three ways that we can look at this. Well, first of all, avoidance, right? Self. This is the fifth excuse. It's avoidance. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we tackle it from the past, right? So you think about, okay, you've arrived at this decision point here, but this is not a faster decision because you've been deciding for years. You're probably here because you've struggled to pull the trigger in the past. So the question is, rear vision mirror analysis. What has been the cost? What has been the opportunity cost? What does not deciding actually cost you? Because this is actually super helpful for us to be able to empower ourselves to make some decisions. Because Ben, there is an emotion here that you want to talk to that a lot of people experience around some of those past decisions when they arrive at having to look themselves in the mirror and say, "This is actually a decision that I need to make."
Bryce, I love the onion analogy for a couple of reasons, right? So I'm going to extend on it in the sense that, the metaphorical tears that have been, as you're peeling back the onion, right? That is the cleansing. That is the looking at that past and really starting to clear your eyes and say to yourself that there is no judgment. What has happened in the past is in the past. And then ultimately starting to get clarity of sight on what is important for you. And that comes from within. This is ultimately an inward-looking decision about living your best life and taking action to do that. Now, you don't have to do all the parts. This is what we've also been talking about. You can bring a team of people in around you to be able to do that. So I just find it really important that you are where you are here right now, and we think our community are an amazing community of aspiring Australians. The reason why you're listening and you're wanting to educate yourself is because of exactly that. You have this innate feeling inside you that things could be better for you. You can make this change. You can have this breakthrough moment. And so that to me is this, this self-talk and this ability to basically say, what's the upside risk versus the downside risk? And the upside opportunity is amazing compared to the downside risk in terms of putting knowledge and education into yourself and then bringing support people around you to be able to, make magic. And I think that is a powerful message in terms of we're not judging the past, we're looking to the future in terms of what that looks like.
Now, Ben, you and I, before we chatted, before we pushed record, there was a lot of emotion around shame that you wanted to talk to at this point as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things we do know observationally is that when we see other people potentially living their best lives and seeming to cope with life, we just get a sense of insecurity, and we get a sense of I'm embarrassed by the fact that I don't know how to manage my money. Most people talk a big game up about their money management abilities, but the reality is, from the evidence that we've seen, there's only 1 to 5% of the people we see are elite money managers. The other 95% of them are pretty ordinary money managers. They might feel like they're okay, but that's again about removing that fear of and that harm. But there is, I've seen a lot of people who struggle with money decisions and make poor decisions in terms of their impact on their future version of themselves. And there is a lot of shame in that. And so I appreciate and I want to recognize to those people that you aren't alone in respecting this idea that it does feel like there is failure. And I want to just remind people that what's gone in the past is in the past. What we try and do in terms of coaching people around money and decisions and behaviors and actions and learning how to trap surplus, and to think about essential and discretionary spending, is to move past beyond that. So acknowledge what it is, have that conversation with yourself to sort of say, yep. And it comes back to that change management that you were talking before about, Bryce, in terms of one of those other important points. So I just feel like, a lot of people, bury their heads in the sand. They feel a little bit of shamefulness around, and they just don't want to address, to the point you made earlier, the elephant in the room. And so I think it really is important that this is the moment that we do talk about not feeling that shame, just acknowledging and using, we hear a lot of people, stories about, I just bottomed out. I basically went bankrupt, and that was my trigger to basically get them to move to the current successful position that they're in. We're saying you don't have to completely bottom out. Just acknowledge that you might have some deficiencies there and get to work on them. And you will turn that shame into the most empowering, motivational tool for you to get better. And so that was the point I wanted to make when I did talk about that earlier, Bryce.
Well said, mate. Well said. And if you're feeling that, folks, it's normal, and there's a part of that that needs to be healing. But you remember, to Ben's point, we are at the core of the onion. We are shedding some of the stuff that we need to let go, and that might be some of it. And this might be the first step for that as well. So there is a book, Ben, by Josh Kaufman. It's called The First 20 Hours. And he says you can get good at any skill, generally speaking, within 20 hours. And he goes in the example of typing in a different, instead of QWERTY, I think it's, I can't remember, the Dvorak is a keyboard. He talks about playing the violin. He talks about learning a new language. He says you can get proficient at the skill within the first 20 hours. Now, that's separate from Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers, who says mastery comes from 10,000. So I'm not talking about that. Just being proficient enough to understand it's 20 hours. And the reason I'm laboring on that is, if it only takes 20 hours to really get the first bit of understanding that you need, and a lot of people have done their first 20 hours just by doing our back catalogue on the podcast, Ben. Yeah. But if you do that first 20 hours, a lot of people spend a lifetime delaying the first hour. Takes you only 20 hours to get proficient, but they spend a whole lifetime avoiding the first hour. So if you can actually do that first hour, you'll find that the remaining 19 happens. So that's really what we're saying here. Don't let the past burn you twice, right? If you haven't taken action in the past, don't let that be the reason why you don't take action in the future, because you don't want to let that burn you twice. So avoidance of self, we've covered it from the past. The next thing we want to cover, Ben, is, well, in the present, all right? So here's what we find, because we have a lot of consultations as a team, right? Initial consultations, where a lot of people think that they need more time. But what you actually need is more information. So let's play that out. You get some information, you decide that you want to, this could be something that you want. And then you go, right, I am now going to go home and I'm going to sit on the back porch, Ben, and I'm going to sit on a rocking chair and I'm just going to rock back and forth, and I'm going to just look into the distance and see the clouds moving across the sky. And I'm just going to ponder with time whether or not this is a good decision for me to make. And of course it's laughable, because anyone who's living in the real world finishes that conversation, answers their 5 text messages, gets to their next deadline, works out how much they're going to pick the kids up from school, or who's covering dinner tonight, or what are we doing on the weekend. We just get into game mode, and that pondering on the rocking chair never happens. So what we've got to realize, it's not time that we need, it's actually more information. And being super clear on what that information is important here, because it's also a fallacy to mistake time for information.
I think well said. And if you then bring that into how you make that decision, you're starting to think about what's involved in that decision, from product to what does it mean for us, what does it mean for you, and basically how accessible is the investment that we need to make, and can we do that? And once you start to think about those types of things as part of problem solving, you will start to get into a really positive mindset about overcoming avoidance. And I was listening to a particular bank CEO last week, and he talked about a nice little framework to think about: getting clarity, then looking at capability, and then looking at motivation. So, thinking about this in that particular. So what's the clarity? Like, what problem am I trying to solve for? And then talking about the competencies and the capability. Do I have the capability to do this just on my own? Or do I need to potentially, again, bring a team of people around me? And then what is my motivation? And we're trying to get to the core of the onion here today, to tap on that motivation and that mindset piece, to sort of say, what's the worst that could go wrong? Like, it's okay to have a swing. What did Jordan say? You miss every shot that you never take.
It's 100% of the shots you don't take.
So that's what we're trying to tap into in terms of understanding capability, competencies, and then motivation to do that. And again, to Bryce's point, this whole framework is just about sort of overcoming those barriers, those mental conversations that you're having with yourself or your significant other, to basically allow you to take action. We're in the financial transformation community here, and we are trying to get you to take action into that financial transformation story.
To add to what you just said earlier too, Ben, for some people, they just don't know how to make a decision. It's just as simple as that. Like, they're so used to FOMO, they're so used to status quo, they're so used to status decrease avoidance, so they don't know how to make a decision. So if it was someone talking to me, because I believe strongly in our property portfolio plan, right? So if I use that as a context here, I ask the question: this is how you make a decision. Do you believe the property portfolio plan would work for you? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Do you think that, and I'll talk about me, do you think that I can help you? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Do you think that this could work for you? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then you've got a bit of work to do, because you obviously haven't demonstrated where the value is, right? But if the answer is yes, then finally, do you, in our case, do you have access to the $500 to get started? Yes or no? Yes, I do. Okay, let's get started. Let's take action. It's as simple as that. But for a lot of people, they haven't actually even thought about what does it actually mean for me to actually make a decision? Because informed decisions are made on the inside, right? And just for clarity, not choosing is a decision.
It is.
Not choosing.
It's a procrastination decision.
Is a decision. So we've covered avoidance for ourselves in the past. We now just talked about the present. So finally, the future, right? So we've talked a bit about this, but you've got to project 5 years into the future, right? And just go, okay, what does the pain feel like if we stack that moving forward? And for the procrastinists, and probably for the perfectionists, and being a recovering perfectionist myself, Ben, I can relate to this, but for those people who go, this has got to be it, or I won't take action, hopefully this will help. We don't need to be snipers. We just need to be directionally correct. So what does that mean? We don't actually have to nail it specifically right now. All you got to ask yourself is, if I take this action, will it get me closer or further away from my goals? If the answer is it gets you further away from your goals, well, there's a problem. If the answer is it gets you closer towards your goals, well, then you are directionally correct. And it's not one and done. You can always move forward. As long as you're moving forward in the direction of your goals, that is a significant win. And that's how you help overcome the perfectionism, the paralysis by analysis, the people who look for the detail as to reasons why they don't move forward. Don't need to be snipers. You just need to be directionally correct. It's that example where the rocket is off track. It's on track 3% of the time, and 97% of the time it's those corrections that you need to make on course to make sure you end up in the destination. It's the same thing here. So
yeah, my motivation is powerful, right? And momentum is powerful. So you put motivation and momentum together, you bring a winning formula to the table to take action. So why do we have Wealth Speed and Wealth Clock on the More platform? It's because we're trying to just demonstrate the little incremental things that you're doing that are actually increasing your wealth speed, and then building it. Oh, it feels a little bit better. And then you get a plan, and like, oh, if you want to supercharge, your wealth speed, and you want to basically make change and hit more of those personal and financial goals that you got, all of these little tools and instruments are supporting you in this ability to take action. And that's all we care about. That's all we care about.
So, folks, if you have peeled down the layers and you've played along at home with us, and you get to this point here where we've actually realised it was us that was in the seat we were avoiding the decisions based on our own self here, and we sort of agree that past, present, and future way is helping us do that. At the end of the process, here's what you realise: that you were always in power, and it was an illusion that you weren't. It was an illusion that we didn't have time to do this, Ben. It was an illusion that we can't see the value in actually moving forward. It's an illusion that we're not sure it's actually for us. It's an illusion that we needed to defer to someone else. And it's an illusion that we weren't in a position to make decisions for ourselves, and we can avoid it for the fear of all the things that we talked around: status quo, fear of messing up, and decreasing our status, which is what we're all trying to avoid. So if you get to the bottom of this, you go, yep, I was always in power. Because here's the ultimate epiphany that we want you to have. The issue we're solving for is not a knowledge gap. Knowledge is empowering, but only, and for the rest of you know what it is, it's an accountability gap, right? So the primary issue with humans in general is this: they will not endure short-term discomfort for long-term achievement. That's it. They will not endure short-term discomfort for long-term achievement. In other ways, we optimize for the local benefit, but we should be optimizing for the global benefit. We know we shouldn't eat the piece of cake now, Ben, but we do because it tastes good in the moment, but it doesn't work towards our bigger goals that we're trying to achieve. So that's it. If you hack that, you hack success. So here's what we want to do for this content today: is we want the people who are suffering from a very high action threshold. Hopefully through the process, we've helped you identify that the lower that you can get your action threshold to actually take steps to move towards what you want to do. And with whoever that is that you seek your advice from, that is the number one hack for success. Because Ben and I have changed our tune over the journey of doing this podcast from a whole bunch of tactics and a whole bunch of strategies to the number one determination of success in our eyes now is just the ability for someone to take action, ideally in the right direction, ideally with the right advice, ideally with going in the right sort of track. But if you can't take action, you will never achieve the success that you want financially. So, folks, how did we go? We started off by saying we want to give you the top 5 reasons why we fail to achieve financial freedom. Were they the 5 you were expecting, Ben? I wonder, for a lot of people, they probably weren't expecting that.
No, I'm sure they weren't all expecting that. But, we've put, for the 450 plus episodes in front of people, a lot of reasons to act, right? And so we are getting more particular about looking at those behavioural and those inner actions to move the dial for those percentage of people who just need that reinforcement learning, who just need that understanding, that recognition, but also can then move past with that and that change management and that accountability that it ultimately is on you to be able to take that action, but move away from all of those, mooring lines and those things that are holding you back into being able to take action. So I really love today's episode because it just, to me, it just reinforces that there are different ways of looking at this. Practical people, maybe thinking, yeah, I sort of knew all that. Other people might be saying, whoa, you've really connected with me on a deeper level. And that's probably, now I get an understanding of why there's certain things in my life that I don't address early. I wait to the last minute to address, or I just completely ignore them. And that's when you come back to that story about building up that sort of anger and that frustration. You are trying to move past all of that to try and be in that position. And to Bryce's point, I haven't seen too many people make really bad mistakes when they're investing and they're being sensible about it, and they're taking sensible approaches and let me see if I can
methodology.
Methodical approach. I got it. Methodical approach in terms of their approach to what they're doing. So, and that's why planning, sequencing, cash flow management, the ABCD, all of those other frameworks come into what we're talking about.
Yeah, folks. So we've said it all along that money is simple, behaviour is hard. You've just seen why behaviour is hard. I'm with Ben. I really enjoy that. Hopefully that's had a meaningful impact. My goal from today, Ben, is that at some point in the future, you or I or both of us together bump into someone who said, "I heard that.
Yeah.
I did have an action threshold that was too high. It helped me lower it. I did take action, and here's the results I got because of that." That would just
Yeah.
make it all the worthwhile. It would be amazing. So
Why we do what we do.
why we do what we do. Well said. So very good. Always having fun with you, Ben. Hey, my life.
Well, no, I just thought before we go on, you might have noticed that we had a change of clothes. And that's because, obviously, as we were saying for people earlier, that we're on, both of you and I are away at the moment, so these have been pre-recorded. So if you're watching the video and you just see a quick change of clothes there, that's the reason for it. So, just sort of finishing off our work.
Look at you with the detail, mate. I'm very proud of you getting in front of that.
I'm just helping our Stigs who do the back end work, because people will be watching this on YouTube going, what just happened?
Yeah, that's right. I remember early in the first season of the show, Ben. Veronica and I used to have to wear the same outfit 2 days in a row, and the first just to avoid that, because they might cut different things in the edit and all those sorts of stuff. Given that we were both pretty terrible back in season 1, and I remember, and some of the places we were doing, Ben, was Mount Newman, up in far north Queensland, the Gold Coast. I remember absolutely sweating like crazy, and then realizing I've got to go back to the hotel, try and quickly rinse the shirt, hang it up, iron it, get it ready so I could wear the same thing the next day. And obviously in some of those busier times, let's just lucky people, for a lot of people, it's television, not smell-o-vision. A couple of second day outfits were a bit pongy.
I like that. It's a nice story.
Yeah. Hey, my life hack today, Ben, is it's entitled "Time in the Dark with Tweens," right? And I don't know where I picked this up. I wish I did. I could quote the person, but they said to me that some of the best time you can have with your tweens, and I haven't got teenagers yet, but it's coming. You do. But what I do with Jack, my eldest, and I absolutely love it, is when I'm driving in the car, or I pick him up from school, or I pick him up from somewhere, and I go, "How was your day?" "Good." I'm like, "Oh wow, this is insightful." Anything happened today? So I try and open as many open-ended questions as I can, and they give me a flat bat. So I'm thinking, how am I going to have a conversation here that's meaningful? Well, I've got a game changer now. So what happens is I put Jack to bed, and I quickly turn the light off as quickly as I can, and I lie on the bed next to him, and he starts talking, right?
Oh.
And it's because the lights are in, and there's no obviously direct face-to-face conversation, whatever it is, expressions. He chats and chats and chats and chats. So I get to ask all these open questions, and he's happy to continually flow the conversation with me. So all of a sudden I start to get a better insight into his day, and a bit more insight into his character, and a bit more what's going on with his heart. And I'm absolutely loving it. So I thought I'd share that with the community, because if you're having challenges trying to pull information out of your kids, try this one. It's been a game changer, and I'm usually really tired at this point, Ben, because you know what it's like. You put the kids to bed and they want to delay it, and it's like, can we just stretch it a little bit longer? And then, oh, can you rub my back? Or can you sit here and chat to me, or whatever? And so now I just embrace it, and so I just quickly get in there, turn the light off, and what happens is once he's got his words out, I'm happy because I'm feeling full and understanding of his world. Then all of a sudden he does this little, and starts to yawn. I'm like, yes, this is my spot. I know his tank's full. I know he's done. My tank's full. I'm done. Bang, I'm out there. And I've got adult time on the couch doing whatever it is that I want to do, watch a show or whatever I want to feed into, have a conversation with my wife. So there you go. That's my life hack today. Time in the dark with your tweens when they're going to bed. Turn the light off, lie next to them, and just see what conversations flow, because I love it. It's rewarding, and I reckon it could be a good answer to those parents who are trying like crazy to learn a little bit more and getting donuts on the response, Ben. So there you go. What's making property news?
Well, firstly, mate, great advice. I'll definitely be sort of thinking about how I can use that as well. Other than when I sort of say, "How's your day, guys?" "Oh, good." All right, how's your day, Dad? Good. What'd you do? Oh, just a bit of work, but a few meetings. How about
Yeah.
we say the platitudes, so I need to get into the depth. So I think that's a great bit of advice. So I'll be taking that on
The
board.
thing is, mate, I don't like soccer, right?
Yeah.
But now, because of Jack, I do, and he tells me about all these people that are in PSG and where Messi's going and what
Yeah.
Mbappe's doing and how he's got he's got a camp coming up and he wants to wear the shirts because all his mates at school or I wouldn't know this stuff if it wasn't
Yeah.
for those little times. So it's just those little insights that I get that I just really value. So yeah, try it, mate. Let us know what you think.
Will do.
What's making property news?
Yeah, well, I'm picking up on the theme of the investor sentiment survey. So again, we're picking this up again. I'll tell you what's interesting about this investor sentiment survey. These people are pretty smart, Bryce. Oh, let me share some of these latest 2 insights for this week, and I'm going to, obviously I'll come back and attack the governments and all that later on. But this one's a little fun one, right? Where it says, "Is now a good time to invest?" 56% of people said yes.
Oh, okay.
24% said no, and 20% said unsure. But over half of the people are thinking, well, if I could actually get some money out of the banks, thanks to APRA, I'd probably add to my portfolio. So that's a pretty good reason. And here's why they're super smart. And they must be listening to us, right? They must be listening to us because 94% of people saying, what's the best type of investment purchase would you make? Would it be vacant land? Vacant land, zero. Obviously, no income producing there. Brand new or off the plan, 6%.
Oh, good. No, that's good stat.
So 0 and 6% leaves what figure left?
Oh, mate, now you're testing me. 94?
94% of people are saying established. So our work is done with this very high caliber. I mean, must have been all of our community filled in the survey in the first instance. But just goes to show you that people are getting smarter because if we'd have done that survey 10, 15 years ago, that brand new or off the plan would have been probably 30 or 40%. So that just goes to show you that the work we're doing with the communities out there in terms of showing them, there's obviously opportunity because there's a lot of spruiking going on. Everyone's telling me that all of the markets are now going to be in boom time. Yeah. I'm not so sure about that. No. So that gives you a bit of an idea in terms of how clever the people who filled in the survey are.
Well, if some of the spruikers were listening to our conversation we had last week with Simon, they might be getting full of optimism about their wares and starting to spruik. So even further.
Yeah.
So, mate, but what's also interesting too is clearly people who have responded to that survey with 94% of established, that's really encouraging because a lot of people that are in the PIPA influenced sphere are more experienced advisors who are playing the experience game and making great advice. So that's kind of really encouraging. I wonder if in a vacuum we could get a survey done of people outside of the PIPA influence to see what those numbers would be, because I wonder if it would be back to your point 10, 15 years ago, if still a lot more people would be going for the off the plan and the new stock.
Yeah, and look, and next week in the show, I'm going to also reveal for you the rankings of best state versus worst state to invest in based on the survey responses. And at the time when we come back from our break, for our next show, I would have also been at the Victorian Parliamentary Inquiry into the rental and affordability crisis. So I'm going to be in one of the public hearing events. I've got 45 minutes with all of the parliamentarians, the members of Parliament, quizzing me, and I'm also going to give them some pretty direct feedback in regards to why the property market is failing here in Victoria. So that could be interesting feedback as well.
Yeah, we're going to try and see if we can get some feeds and some links and all those sorts of things. But, mate, share with the community some of the activities you had to do to be the squeaky hinge to get a seat at that table.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I had to do a lot of massaging. They say the squeakiest cog gets the most oil, right? So I wrote to them, I rang them. I really pushed the agenda about trying to make sure that, because so far all of the public hearings have been very much focused on the tenant. And so there was really just no representation from the key stakeholder who provides about 90 to 95% of all rental accommodation, and that is the mum and dad and private investor. So if we were going to hear from trade, we were going to hear from all of the associations and the businesses and the governments that supply the support services for tenants, and we were hearing from tenants, but there was nothing coming from the actual investor. So we're going to give a voice to the investor, and obviously I'll be wearing my PIPA hat as the chair of PIPA, doing that particular work at that public inquiry.
Thanks for sharing that story, mate. I think a lot of what is visible to me because I see it, but a lot of our community wouldn't know some of the campaigning and the work that you have to do behind the scenes, which can be tireless and thankless. And just to give them a little insight of what it even just took for you to get a seat at that table, because they weren't inviting you. You had to try and muscle your way in just to represent the voice of the property investor. So well done on your efforts, mate. And I'm going to thank you on behalf of all the property investors for all the work that you're doing, because it is definitely allowing us to get a voice into how it impacts us and a lot of the unintended consequences that you will be able to share with them. And mate, I would like to be in that room watching you when you give them some feedback around why the property market is failing in Victoria, mate. Hang on. Hang on.
I'm very polite. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not an emotional thing. It's just a fact of this is the data. This is what's happening. Victoria is on the nose for investors, and it's going to be a problem.
There you go, folks. Top 5 reasons why you failed to achieve financial freedom. Can you relate? Is that something that resonated for you? Did you have an aha moment? Mate, it was always good riffing with you on this framework. And until next week, when we'll be able to talk about the footy and who's happening and what's going on, mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it.
See you next week, folks.